Is UFC 300, the biggest card in UFC history, really going to turn out to be a complete flop? There's a famous quote by Dana White, and he was speaking about UFC 300. And he said, and I quote, "When you think of UFC 300, even the prelims will be like, holy shit." They just announced Yaonan Zhan versus Weili Zhang for the main event. And actually, I don't know if it's the main event, but they announced it, and I'm sure it's going to be either the main or co-main. Now, while that fight's going to be a banger, it's not what we expected for UFC 300. I was thinking they was going to give Conor McGregor the main event slot, John Jones the main event slot. But no, they're giving us Weili Zhang versus Yaonan Zhan, and there's rumors that the co-main event or the main event is going to be Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad.
It doesn't matter, from the trenches.
Now, there's nothing against these guys, but when you're talking about John Jones or Conor McGregor fighting on the biggest card in UFC history, then it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But now we ain't talking about those guys. We're talking about Belal Muhammad and Yaonan Zhan. It's a bit of a disappointment, I can't lie. Now, obviously, it's only early on. We're in January right now. There's a lot of time that the UFC has to juggle things about. But if they don't get John Jones or Conor McGregor on the card, it's not going to go down as the banger of the card that they hoped it would. What's crazy is that right now, the pay-per-view previous to UFC 300, the one the month before, is looking way better than UFC 300. They just announced Benoit Saint-Denis versus Dustin Poirier, and that made waves throughout the MMA realm. Now, I'm a professional sports bettor for a living. I make my money betting on MMA, and that matchup made waves throughout my industry for a different reason. A lot of people stand to make a lot of money on Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis, but I'll get into that fight in a later video. My point is that that fight is a banger, and that's the type of fight that we would expect to see on a prelim of UFC 300 based on what Dana White was saying about it. Or maybe the main card, but you get my point. These are the type of matchups that I expected to be announced on UFC 300. Instead, they're announcing them on UFC 299. We also got Michael Page, who's massively hyped in the MMA world, big Bellator star, making his UFC debut on UFC 299 against Kevin Holland. Another fight that you would expect to be on UFC 300. Same thing with another welterweight matchup on UFC 299. Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Absolute banger of a matchup. Why ain't it on UFC 300? What do they have in store for UFC 300 that's keeping all of these other banger matchups off it? No matter how many matchups they have in store for UFC 300, it's going to be hard to top Benoit Saint-Denis and Dustin Poirier. You're never going to be able to recreate someone like Michael Page making their debut again. But guess what? The future heavyweight champion, or probably future heavyweight champion, Jailton Almeida, is fighting on that card against Curtis Blaydes. If Jailton wins that fight, he's next in line for a title shot. Him versus Aspinall is going to be an insanely massive fight if John Jones retires after he beats Stipe, which I expect him to do. Another fight we can talk about, Yadong Song versus Peter Yan on the prelims of UFC 299, not UFC 300. I don't know if Dana White got mixed up and forgot how to count and thought 299 meant 300. But all of the banger matchups I just told you are not on UFC 300. They're on the pay-per-view previous. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, man. So I don't know what Dana White's got in plan for UFC 300. Obviously, he's going to have some big fights. He probably will announce Conor McGregor or John Jones, but it needs more than that, in my opinion. You can't just bang Conor McGregor, who's washed at this point in his career,
Stop it!
on UFC 300 and think that you don't have to beef up the rest of the card just like they've done with UFC 299. Even if they put John Jones on the card. It's against Stipe. I don't think the hype for that fight is massive. Like, the hype for Peter Yan versus Yadong Song is probably similar to the hype for John Jones and Stipe Miocic. At least with the hardcores anyway. Obviously, John Jones has massive reach in terms of the casual audience. But you get what I'm trying to say. Dana White is a hardcore fan. And with him coming out with quotes like I told you at the start of the video, you would have expected some more banger matchups to be announced for UFC 300 and not announced for UFC 299. Look, there are some good matchups on UFC 300. We've got Aljamain Sterling making his 145 debut against Calvin Kattar. We've got Bo Nickel fighting off against the GOAT, Cody Brundage. Jiri's fighting Rakic, but the fights just don't compare to UFC 299 at this stage, man. But let me tell you about some mad rumors. There's some crazy fights rumored to be on UFC 300, but they're just rumors at the moment. And I can't trust rumors, because one of the rumors was Alexa Grasso versus Weili Zhang. And now they've announced that actually that was only a rumor. It was a bullshit rumor. And Yaonan Zhan is now facing Weili Zhang. So it's tough to believe these rumors. But let's have fun for a minute. Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira moving up to become a freeweight UFC champion, the first one in history. That's a rumor. Another rumor is that Ben Askren and George Masvidal are coming out of retirement to face each other in a rematch. Ben Askren came out the other day on Twitter and said something like, the only fight he would ever come out of retirement for is a George Masvidal rematch. And then everyone started speaking about, damn, Dana White knows what he's doing. He might bring him back for UFC 300. And then you know how it goes, the tabloids start talking, YouTube starts talking, all of that stuff. Israel Adesanya versus the winner of Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. I'm pretty sure Izzy came out recently and said that he's down for fighting this year. He wants to get back in the octagon. So that seems a perfect matchup. If no one gets badly injured, it seems like a logical step that Izzy would fight the winner of that, especially with Pereira moving up to light heavyweight now. And the big rumor, which seems to happen on every massive pay-per-view, Ronda Rousey returning. Brock Lesnar returning. I mean, we can sit and have some fun, have some entertainment and think about these things, but are any of these matchups actually going to happen? I don't know. As it stands, looking at you right now, I can tell you that UFC 299 shits on UFC 300. So I'm going to cut the boss some slack, Daniel White. He still has some tricks up his sleeve, I'm sure. So I'll revisit this topic in a couple of weeks after some potential big announcements. Thanks for watching. Oh, and if you want to make money betting on MMA, most certainly subscribe to the channel, because I'm basically going to teach you how to do it for free.